do the processes around the penalties need to change? Because this isn't the first time we've seen something like this go down.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, sometimes, you've got to give the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes there's going to be things that happen in the race, especially in the closing stages, where it's like, look, we need to follow this up with the drivers. What I've never understood in that situation is if you know the leader of the race has to go see the stewards, I don't understand why Formula One or why the FIA's that doesn't say then, right, push everything back. He's going straight to the stewards. We'll decide then we'll do the podium ceremony. Because I think it's a ridiculous kind of farcical situation to have a guy on the top step of the podium and you're like, well, he might not actually win the race. And it's happened a few times, where people have lost a podium position afterwards in the stewards room. And, if you've watched that race, it's, imagine this winter, but summer in some parts of the world in the World Cup, you see one team celebrating with the trophy. And then an hour later, it's like, well, actually, they've just awarded 2 goals to the team that lost. So they won. And you're like, oh, okay, I just saw them celebrate. What, what's that about? So I think that from a sporting point of view, it's terrible. On that occasion, it was strange as well because, they'd done a warning, they'd had a warning, and then, they'd spoken to Perez again in the car. And I always think as well, when you do a retrospective punishment like that, they know they're dealing with the winner of the race at that point. And I think the stewards, on the whole, try and make the fairest decision they can. But I think when you're like, well, this guy won the race, it must play on your mind in some way. You think, well, if we give him this penalty, he'll keep the win, but we have kind of enforced the rule book. So I just think from a general look point of view, I just think it's pretty awful. And I mean, we Laurence and I, we go to a lot of these races together, and there's been some where you're super frustrated just waiting. I mean, Monza a few weeks ago, we waited about 4 hours for the FIA just to confirm the starting order of the grid, and we had all these different kind of grid orders going around, and we were like asking the FIA, what do you think? One team said they thought Alonso was like Alpine were like, we think Alonso's starting 5th. Then Aston Martin were like, no, we think Alonso's 10th on our grid. Look, if you look at it this way. And, we kept asking the FIA, like, what's the deal here? And they were like, almost kind of perplexed we were asking. It's like, well, people, especially nowadays, like the way sport moves with social media, etc., it's constantly in the now. So I don't think you can have situations like that. The Perez thing, it just seemed like a bit of a formality. I don't know. It seemed like they could have done that in the race. So yeah, I think there's so many things about that need to change. And I know that from a broadcasting point of view, the broadcasters like to have the podium straight after the race. So I totally see why that happens. But I just think if there's a penalty hanging over someone, having a ceremony like that at all is pretty pointless, especially if the driver's only just going into the steward's room to be like, okay, by the way, here's what I was doing. Here's why. The stewards can say, okay, well, we already have been talking about this. Boom, no penalty or penalty. Issue the verdict straight away, and then do the podium, because fans still might hate that, but at least they see the legitimate winner on the top step of the podium, or the top 3 are the top 3. So definitely has to change, but I think that's something that probably won't change in the short term, just because it's the way it's always been done, and that's kind of that's one thing that I think you come to notice in racing, is that a lot of things that have been done for a long time just kind of stay around because that's the way it always has been.
Laurence, you had rain boots on the ground. What's the vibe when you guys are waiting like that?
Yeah, frustration, I think, mainly in the media center, because I had a flight at 6 a.m. The race finished around 11 p.m. I think we got the results through around 2 a.m. So I was starting to think, like, how long is this going to last? Because there'll be a point at which I have to cut off. But fortunately, the timing that came through was enough to write the story, pack up my bag, and head to the airport. But yeah, it's a tricky one, because again, you want to get this right, and as a sport as technical as F1, you do need these kind of, I mean, it's a weird rule, 10 lengths behind the safety car. Most fans will look at that, they'll be like, well, why do you even need that? But, the whole point of the safety car is it bunches the cars together, usually so that the marshals can attend to something on track. So it is important that the cars are bunched together. And also, you don't want one driver going back from the safety car because he believes he can gain some kind of advantage with not warming his tires because he knows his car is better on the tires or something like that. So there's lots of little reasons why you have these very particular rules, and they're all there for a reason. There's always been something that's happened in the past that's led to a rule going into the sporting regulations. And so it's a tricky one. And the thing with Perez in Singapore is he did it 3 times. So He did it once and he was reprimanded for that again after. Then he did another one during the race, during the second safety car, and he got a warning, like in real time warning from race control. And then he still did it again, and that's what he got the 5-second penalty for. And the 5-second penalty meant that he was still 2.5 seconds ahead of Leclerc because Leclerc finished 7.5. So the other problem with it is that, you know, when you get a reprimand for one but a 5-second penalty for the other, you know, there's this kind of element of inconsistency and an in-race warning for another. You know, it's a tricky one. It's not as simple as football, like the ball goes over the line, it's a goal, or it's a throw in, or this is English football, not, you know, soccer, I should say, rather than American football. But, you know, the same applies to a lot of ball sports, right? It's either in or out. Whereas there's a lot of these kind of judgment calls in F1, and then the penalty that results in it is also a judgment call that has to be made by this panel of stewards, which, by the way, should be following everything else that's going in this race, 20 cars all moving around together at the same time, racing each other wheel to wheel, you know, in case something else happens, and they have to then kind of make a decision on something else. So it is tricky, and they've bolstered the amount of help the stewards get this year. So as a result of Abu Dhabi last year, they brought in this remote panel, which is based in Geneva, and they have a direct connection with the stewards. And they're not really doing the stewards' job, but they're doing all the background work. So as much as they can, they're cross-referencing other examples of incidents. So I got to see this firsthand in Spa, and they have this amazing archive where you type in Leclerc and you get all of the examples where Leclerc's got a penalty for various different things, or you type the type of penalty and you get all the list of drivers who did it at different tracks. And the idea being that there is then more consistency as you go through. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't have access to that, unfortunately, on Sunday night, Monday morning, whenever it was. But I'm sure maybe if you go back in time, there were times when a driver did it and they got a reprimand first, but they would have got a 5-second penalty the second time. So I'm sure there's consistency there. But that's why these things take a little bit longer. And so, like I said before, in a way, I'd rather they get it right, but completely understand it's frustrating. You know, you turn off your TV at the end of a great race, but you don't know who the winner is. I mean, yeah, it's tricky. But if that does happen again, ESPN.com. We'll let you know as soon as it happens.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.